Okay, good morning students. Now we are going to discuss about the production of the steel. So different processes are there for the production of steel, particularly what we are taking as a raw material, that is the pig iron we are taking as a raw material. Already we have produced the pig iron in a blast furnace, and that pig iron will be transferred to a steel melting shop where we are going to produce the steel. Generally, number of processes are adopted for the steel making, but particularly nowadays we are following the LD converter for the production of the steel. Whatever the process may be, but the technology behind that, or that is the concept behind that, is the same thing actually. The concept will be same, but the processes will be different, like that of the open hearth furnace, LD converter. Different processes are there. Now, what is the concept behind the production of the steel making? Now we are going for the, suppose we are taking the pig iron first, and that pig iron we have taken in a, suppose we are taking a LD converter. We have taken that pig iron in a LD converter, and that is in a molten form. Actually that pig iron is around at a temperature of around 1250 to 1300 degrees centigrade. So that pig iron is taken inside that LD converter, and what we want to do, we want to separate the impurities. We know that what are the impurities present. The impurities present, that you know also. What are the impurities present? That impurities may be carbon, particularly the most available impurity is the carbon. Next to carbon is, that is manganese, phosphorus, silicon, sulfur. These are the things present mostly available in the pig iron. So the pig iron generally contains 92 to 93% iron and 7 to 8% these impurities. But in a final steel, the percentage of iron should be 99.5%. So that means 0.5% these impurities will be available in the steel. But what we have to, so in order to get this type quality of steel, what we have to do with the pig iron? That is a big question. So what we have to do? We have to take out these impurities. So how can we remove these impurities? We can remove these impurities in the form of slag. So in order to form a slag, what we have to do? We have to just represent the impurities in their oxide state. So that is the primary step, so that they will move towards the slag, or they will form the slag. That means they have to oxidize. So we need a source of oxygen or a oxidizer which can oxidize these impurities. So the steel makers thought what should be the right choice of this oxidizer. So they selected pure oxygen, because here the process is a quicker process, and particularly if we are concentrating upon the LD converter, the process takes around 50 minutes. So this process is a very quicker process. So what we have to do, we have to take a pure material. So that's why we have taken a almost pure oxygen. So that purity of oxygen is around 99.5%. So that purity oxygen is used in the LD converter, so that these impurities will get oxidized. So whenever we are giving oxygen, that impurities, once that is getting the oxygen, they will definitely oxidize to their oxide state. So like this, so what will happen? Whatever the carbon is there, that will convert into carbon monoxide, but it is a gas. Carbon monoxide will be produced as a gaseous state. But what happens to manganese? Manganese will oxidize to MnO, manganese oxide. Phosphorus similarly will be oxidized to phosphorus pentoxide, P2O5. Similarly, silicon will be oxidized to silica, SiO2, and sulfur is a something different. Actually, sulfur is present in a combined form as a FeS. And so what we have to do? Now we have to remove the sulfur by the taking the help of the lime. Forget about this sulfur, we will make it silent. First we will discuss about the other impurities. So whenever we are supplying oxygen, one thing may be coming in your mind, that iron is there in the pig iron, so definitely iron will get oxidized. So it's right actually. Some amount of iron will get oxidized to FeO. So that FeO, second question may be coming in your mind, that what will happen to this FeO? That FeO will again join to the slag, and that FeO, whatever the iron that is associated with this FeO, that will be lost. Because that FeO is joining to the slag. Once the FeO is joining to the slag, means iron loss will be there. So during the steel making, some around 25 to 30% iron loss will be there in the case of the steel making process. So these are the oxidation reactions taking place during the steel making process. So now we'll move to the next slide where we have shown you the LD converter. This is the LD converter. This is the sketch of the LD converter. What we are showing here, that first thing is that that is a LD converter. That black line is the outer line, is that is the LD converter, inside which we have taken the material. That pig iron we have taken, and you can see the oxygen lance here. The oxygen lance is here, oxygen lance is here. That oxygen lance will supply the pure oxygen. Through this lance we are supplying the pure oxygen, and this oxygen is reacting with the steel, and this is reacting with the particular pig iron, and what it is doing, it is just trying to oxidize the impurities. Once the impurity will oxidized, then they will gradually join to the slag phase. Is it okay? So this is the slag. The red color in this diagram, in the red color we have shown the slag, and in the bottom part the steel is there. Slag is lighter because that is the oxide state, but in the steel actually the iron will be there, around 99.5% iron will be there, and 0.5% other impurities. But all these impurities in the steel will be found in a free state or metallic state. That means silicon will be present as Si, manganese will be present as Mn, like this. So these things will be there. 99.5% iron will be there, and 0.5% other impurities will be there. So this is the process by which we are producing. This is the sketch of the LD converter, where we are already we have read about the LD converter in detail, but though we are going to continuous casting, here I have to give the brief idea about the LD converter. So here we are producing the steel. Once the steel production will be over, after 50 minutes, what we are doing, we are taking out the lance. There is a provision is there, lance can move up and down, flexibility of movement will be there. So this lance will be taken out. Oxygen, first the oxygen supply will be cut off, and the lance will be taken out. So after this, what we are doing, we are just trying to tilt the converter. By tilting, we can first collect the slag in a ladle. After the collection of the slag, we will collect the metal. How the question arises, how we are by vision, means by actually manual basis we are doing this operation. That means by using a double blue glass, we can see that slag is first coming out from the converter. Slag is coming out, and as the metal will come out, we will stop the process. We'll take out that ladle. That ladle already collected the slag. Then we have to now collect the metal, that is the steel, in another ladle. Again we'll tilt the converter, and again we'll take out the steel. So in this way we can produce the steel, and that steel is produced at a temperature of 1700. Exact steel making temperature is around 1640 degrees centigrade. But here we are producing steel at say around generally 1700 degrees centigrade steel is produced. Now the question arises, what we have to do with the steel so that that steel will be transferred into a sellable state. So हम लोग market में we are selling the steel in the form of particularly like ingot, sheet, bars, like this. The simplest shape is, that is the ingot. From the ingot we can produce the bar, plate, other shapes. So the primary step, the primary shape of the steel is, that is the ingot. So what is the structure of the ingot? Ingot is just like a brick structure. It's a rectangular block, and so that block solidified block will be sent to a hot rolling mill, where we can press that ingot so that we can convert it into a steel slab, or say plate, foil, strip, whatever the requirement will be there, we can produce. Also long products like that of the channels, bars, solid cylindrical bars, square section bars, all these can be produced from this ingot. So preliminary step for this steel is, that is the ingot. First we have to convert the molten steel into the ingot form. That ingot will be now transferred into different shapes. So we are moving to our next slide. So next slide is, that is, this is our molten steel. that steel is producing. So in industry, this photo shows in a industry by using of the LD converter, we are producing the, how we are producing the steel. This is a LD converter. We are putting the molten pig iron into the converter. We are transferring molten pig iron through a ladle. This one is the ladle, and we are transferring the molten pig iron into the ladle. Is it okay? Into the LD converter. So this is the industrial photo. Now we are moving to casting side. What is a casting? So in the very beginning step of the casting, they were producing the ingot in a discontinuous way. That means they were taking the mold boxes, individual mold boxes, and they are putting the molten steel inside that mold box, and just by cooling from outside of the mold box by butter, spraying butter, so that the solidified ingot can be produced. But the process is a little slower process. Why? Because it's a discontinuous casting. One mold box can cast at a time a single ingot. Similarly, suppose at a time we want to cast 100 number of ingots, so we have to take 100 number of mold boxes. So at a time we can produce 100 number of mold boxes, can produce 100 number of ingots. And similarly, after the casting of 100 ingots, again we will use that same 100 mold boxes for the casting of again second 100 ingots. So in this way, this was the discontinuous casting, but this was a slow process. Now what we have to do, metallurgists thought, how can we produce the ingots at a faster rate? In that concept contest, they have gone for the build up of a continuous casting process. So what is a continuous casting process? Continuous casting process means they have to take a single short mold with a false bottom at the bottom. They have to provide a false bottom. So here we have to show what is the continuous casting. Here I have written the dimming of liquid metal in a short mold with a false bottom through which partially solidified ingot is continuously withdrawn at the same rate at which metal is poured in the mold. So what we are doing, we are putting, suppose this is a mold box we have taken, we are putting the molten steel from the top of the mold box, and because top is open, only 4 walls are there, and those walls are water cooled. Is it okay? And at the bottom a false bottom is given, and we are putting the steel from the top, and we are taking out the bottom slowly down, so that the steel structure, a bar like structure will be coming out from the structure, that is from the mold box. So this is called as the partially solidified ingot is coming out from the mold box. So in this way we can produce a long bar. So that long bar we can cut according to our requirement, and we can produce the ingots. So already the cross section is fixed. The bar is coming, and the length is a huge one. So we are cutting according to our requirement, and we can get the ingots like this. So this continuous casting was developed first in a very simplified way, and laterally it is just modified. So this continuous casting steel now it has having 3 different types. That is, first one is the vertical type, second one is the vertical mold and horizontal discharge type, last one is the curved mold, and this can be represented as a S type continuous casting. So preferably nowadays we are following the third one, that is the curved mold type, but it was developed gradually from that of the vertical type. First the vertical type was developed, then the second type, that is vertical mold and horizontal. In a vertical type, actually the continuous casting shop was a tall shop, because we have to produce the that ingot at the top, then it has to come down, then it has to cool down. After cooling, we have to cut according to our requirement. So the shop height will be very long one. So they thought that how can we reduce the shop height. So the second concept came, that is the vertical mold and horizontal discharge type. In the vertical mold and horizontal discharge type, what they are doing, the mold box is vertical. We are putting the molten steel in a vertical mold. But once the product is coming out, we are providing a bending roll, and that bending roll is bending the material into the horizontal position, so that the soft height can be reduced. I will show you in the next slide, that is the second type. Second type is the most vital. So this one is the second type. So what we are doing here, that is, this is the transform ladle. That means here in a ladle we have put the steel. So this steel, molten steel, is put in the ladle, then it is transferred to tondis. So what is the work of a tondis? Tondis actually closely regulates the flow of the steel. That means tondis will now produce the steel, or that can now allow the steel to enter into the mold box, but the steel will come in a streamline. So this one, the blue lines, this sky color thing is, that is the mold box. So this one is the mold box. We have shown you the two faces of the mold box. Here we are putting the steel. The steel we are putting in the mold box, and the mold, the ingot, that is bar, is coming at the bottom. Bar niche aa raha hai, bar is coming down. This red side, two sides is showing red. That means a skin is forming. Once the steel enters into the mold box, the because this mold box is a water cooled mold box is there. So water cooled mold box means the solidification will simultaneously proceed. Once the steel enters into the mold box, solidification on the surface will be taken place. Surface of the steel will solidify, and thus this solidification will gradually increase. Once the steel is coming down, the solidification will gradually increase like this. Once it is coming out from the mold box, here the number of rollers are there. Number of rollers, and inside these rollers one secondary cooling zone is there, where we are directly spraying water, because once it is coming out from the mold box, a skin is already formed, so that steel, liquid steel, can confined in the inside the skin, and that skin is thicker, otherwise it will rupture. You should be ensure that once the that bar is coming out from that of the mold box, that solidified skin should be formed, and the thickness of the skin should be a thicker one. Otherwise the inside core or the liquid core will just put a thrust upon that of the skin, and skin may rupture, so that liquid steel will come out from the skin. That's why as the material or the bar is coming out from the mold box, by that time the skin should be thicker one. Is it okay? And once it is coming down, it is bent by the different rolls. These rolls are helping to bend the bar, and once the bar is coming down, also we are now through secondary cooling, we are cooling the material. This is the secondary cooling system. Here water sprays are there, directly we are spraying water over the bar, so that cooling rate will be faster. And here you can mark the skin thickness is increasing, and here at this point generally the cross section becomes solidified. Once it is solidified, it is coming out from the secondary cooling system, and again it is produced in a horizontal way. Now the bar is coming in a horizontal way. So once the bar is coming down as a horizontal way, here a cutting torch will be there, and this cutting torch, actually what it is doing, now this cutting torch is trying to cut the material. And here a technical thing is there, you have to mark. Once suppose a cutting torch is stationary, it is cutting at a particular spot or focusing. Suppose we are using a gas torch, it is now focusing upon a particular point, but this bar is continuously coming out, so that this focusing point may change anytime, so our cutting may not complete anytime. So what we have to avoid this thing. So what we have done, we have to just move the torch with the same speed with that of the withdrawing of the bar जिस स्पीड से जा रहा है, we have to just move the cutting torch with the same speed, so that the cutting will be continued upon a small same spot. Once it will cut, end the cutting, the torch will return to its original position and will take a bar. हमको एक particular size का bar मिल जाएगा. Is it okay? And that is called as ingot. Here one thing you have to mark, the rate of withdrawal of this bar should be equal to the addition of the steel. That's why here we are using the tondis. We cannot transfer the steel directly from the mold box. Otherwise our control upon the flow of the steel will be less. Here a tondis is there, a stopper rod is provided to the tondis, so that we can closely regulate the flow of the steel. That means what I want to say, here the speed of the steel entering into the mold box should be same as the withdrawal of the बार. सो बार का जो जिस स्पीड से जा रहा है स्टील भी उतना स्पीड से आउट होगा. दिस इज ऑल अबाउट दैट ऑफ द वर्टिकल मोल्ड हॉराइजॉन्टल डिस्चार्ज टाइप. So further details, if we want to, you want to know about the this continuous casting or particularly this type in a detail, in a detailed manner, you can also follow this material, that is the in NPTEL site. You can visit this, whatever the link I have given, you can note this link, and through this link you can get the more video upon this. Okay, in the next class we will discuss about that of the third of the core type. Okay, thank you. Here we are stopping. Okay, thank you.